Hello and welcome to my long overdue pregnancy update video. Ooh, can you hear that? So I'm actually no longer pregnant, but we'll get to that in a second. But this is just kind of an update on the end of the pregnancy and everything that's happened since then. So if you watched my last update video, that was around 32 weeks and I had just gotten my gestational diabetes diagnosis and I was kind of like dealing with that in the last video. So after that, I continued to deal with that until the end of the pregnancy, but I did sort of figure out how to get a handle on my gestational diabetes using insulin and diet and exercise. So I did ultimately figure it out, but like I figured it out and got good at it like a couple of weeks before I had the baby. But because of that, I do want to do a video on some of my favorite foods because I did find that it really wasn't that bad when I actually went out there and searched and found some good foods that were low carb. It wasn't that bad of a diet. So that's coming in a video in the future. I want to show you that. Let's see. So after my 32-week video, at some point, like I think it was close to 34 weeks, I would say, I moved basically, or not moved, but like I didn't live at my house anymore. I lived with my mom because she was closer to the doctor that I was using for the delivery. And if you're new here, I've gone through this in some of the other videos, but basically after going through 5 miscarriages, I had a lot of trouble finding a doctor that I really trusted, that I felt understood recurrent miscarriages and really wanted to take care of me. Well, I finally found that doctor, but he was not in the city that I lived. He was about an hour and a half or an hour or so away. So, and not only an hour or so away, but he was like on the other side of the swamp, basically on the other side of a really big bridge that always has traffic trouble. So it wasn't very feasible for me to stay at my home whenever I was like very pregnant, because if I needed to go to the hospital, there was a good chance that we would get stuck in traffic on this bridge and that would not be fun. So at 34 weeks, I packed up my bags and went live with my mom for a while. And whenever I was with her, it was a whole lot easier to be able to go to the doctor because she was close to the doctor. It was just a short little drive versus a long drive. So I did that. And while I was staying with my mom, it was kind of nice. She helped me out a lot. And I got to do a lot of sewing, little baby projects. And so that's something that I might want to do on the channel. I'm not sure if anybody's interested. If you are, please let me know in the comments. But I did a ton of sewing little things, like sewing little outfits and sewing bibs and burp cloths and little blankets. And I sewed his diaper bag, all kind of stuff. So let me know if you're interested in that because that was a lot of fun. And then let's see. Oh, I also did my maternity shoot and my mom helped me do that. I kind of like set up the camera and she did the clicking for me. And then at about 36 weeks, once we had reached full term, the doctor decided that he wanted to induce me. Well, and I should say before that, we started doing, because of the diabetes, we started doing these NST tests. They're non-stress test. And you just go to the doctor and they put something on your belly so that they can hear the heartbeat of the baby, and they let you lay there for like 20 minutes while they listen to the heartbeat, and they just kind of want to see that the heartbeat is like going up and going down and going up and it looks like it's healthy. So I started doing that, and actually there were several times when I did that when the heartbeat just like went super high. Like the heartbeat went up to 200 or above 200 several times. And so they would have to check on the ultrasound to look at everything and make sure that the baby was okay. And every time the heartbeat would come down eventually when they were on ultrasound. But that started to worry me, and really I started looking up like, what does this mean? And nobody else seemed to have that issue. So I still don't know what it meant, but we had that trouble where it would just, his heartbeat would go super fast during the NST test. The doctor kept telling me not to worry. He said he actually would worry if it went the opposite direction, like if the heartbeat went down and stayed down, that would be worrisome. But the heartbeat going up and staying up for quite a while wasn't as worrisome. But At about 36 weeks, the doctor told me that we were going to induce. And I knew we were going to induce because I have this thing called beta thalassemia where my hemoglobin is basically messed up. And so I have had to have blood transfusions throughout my pregnancies. And because of that, I have to have, like, they have to make sure that my blood is good before going into labor. And like make sure everything's good. And then they have to check again after labor because I might need a transfusion after labor. And I was induced with my first child. So I knew that was going to happen. But he told me because of that, because I was on Lovenox and I needed to switch over to heparin, which I did at 36 weeks. I stopped using the Lovenox and started using heparin twice a day. And then also because of the recurrent miscarriages, and we were thinking that it was immunological based, there is some data to show that it seems like people that have immune issues in pregnancy, towards the end of the pregnancy, their placenta can start to kind of like peter out and it's not really doing what it needs to be doing. So according to Dr. Beer, and then my doctor also said this, with these cases, with recurrent miscarriages, they would prefer to induce earlier. And it's sort of like in most cases, you would rather the baby to be in the mom because that's the best place for them in most cases. But in people that have recurrent miscarriages that are thought to be immune based, they find that it's actually better to induce a little bit earlier because if there is an issue, it can be taken care of in the NICU. Whereas if the placenta dies and the baby is still, or not dies, but if the placenta is not doing its job and the baby is still inside the womb, then stuff can happen and you have no idea that stuff is going downhill. So I already knew we were going to be inducing early. I didn't know how early and I didn't know exactly when, but at my 36-week appointment or somewhere around there, he told me that we were inducing at 37 weeks. Now, let's see. So I kind of gave you some of the reasons. Well, the transfusion issue was one. The Lovenox. So with the Lovenox and the heparin, he just wanted to make sure that we were like planning the delivery. He didn't want it to be like an out of the blue, like something that just all of a sudden I go into labor, because then I might not have the ability to have an epidural. And the reason is because if you're on Lovenox, you can't have an epidural within 24 hours of your last dose. And if you're on heparin, you can't have an epidural within 12 hours of your last dose. Because if either one of those drugs is active in your system and you have an epidural, then there's a chance that you can have a bleed from the spinal cord or something. And that doesn't sound good. So that's not something that we wanted. So we wanted to plan ahead of time. I had to check my blood. Let's see. And then also because of the diabetes and because of the NST test, they were like checking the size of the baby. And the baby was showing larger than, I guess, average. And at 30, I think it was like 35 weeks, according to the ultrasound, the baby was already at 6 pounds. Or like maybe 6 pounds and some change. So all of that together, plus the fact that whenever I went in at 36 weeks, I was already like moving along somewhat. I was already somewhat dilated and effaced. And I was already having the prodromal labor kind of thing where I'm having contractions, but they're not really within 5 minutes of each other. They're just kind of like, sometimes they would be within 5 minutes of each other and then they would stop. That sort of thing. But with all of that stuff together, and plus the fact that I was actually somewhat on the way to labor, they decided that I would be induced at 37 weeks on the dot. The Friday, like I turned 37 weeks on Friday and I went into the hospital that Friday night. So I went into the hospital and I was induced with Pitocin, and I'll do a whole birth story video because those all like, the birth story is always like this big, there's always a lot that goes with it, right? And I don't want this video to be too long. So we'll do that another time. But anyways, gave birth and it was a baby boy. And that was a surprise. We didn't know the gender beforehand. So that was really cool. And after the baby was born, within the hour, like when it first was born, we thought everything was fine. Like he cried. The doctor's like, oh, he looks great. You know, the lungs seemed good because he was crying. And that's what I thought was the like hallmark for bad lungs, was if the baby's not crying when it comes out. So everything seemed good. They left us alone, or semi-alone, for like an hour to have skin to skin and family time and all that kind of stuff. And during that hour, things started to turn for the worse. And then we ended up having a bunch of nurses coming in. And in the end, he had to be admitted into the NICU. His lungs were not fully developed the way that I guess we had hoped that they would be. So he went into the NICU for respiratory distress syndrome, and that just means that his lungs weren't where they needed to be for him to be outside in the air. And after him being in the NICU and me like Googling nonstop trying to figure out what exactly this meant, I found that in people that have gestational diabetes, particularly if it's controlled by insulin, the insulin can cause the surfactant inside the lungs to not develop as quickly as normal. And the surfactant is what helps the alveoli, which are those little like bubbles that you have inside your lungs that expand and contract when the air comes in and out. And so without the surfactant, there's no surface tension, or maybe there's too much surface tension, I think. So the alveoli can't expand and contract for you to breathe, or for him to breathe normally. So in order for him to breathe, he was having to like use a lot of force and like having to work towards it, like as if you were trying to like, it wasn't something that just came naturally. He was having to like force his lungs to open and then force them to close. And so that takes a lot of work. And when you're a baby that just came into the world, you don't have a whole lot of excess energy to give up. So he had to go into the NICU so that they could help him breathe. They put him on it's called a CPAP machine that just kind of like forced the air in and out of his lungs so that he didn't have to do as much work. We were lucky that he never had to be intubated, where they like actually put the tube all the way down the throat and do the breathing for you. He didn't have to do that, but he did have to have some like forced air to help his lungs, and a little bit of like extra supplemental oxygen to help his lungs. On top of that, he had his sugar levels were low when he was first born. And at first they wanted to give him formula to fix his sugar levels, because if their sugar levels are low, that's what you do. You feed them and you bump up their glucose. And I guess the easiest way to do that is just go ahead and do formula. But I was like so adamant, like I was stubborn that I was going to breastfeed this baby, and it was going to be exclusively breastfed. And I had said before, like, no one is giving my baby formula in the hospital. I was so adamant about it. And when they tell me that they're going to give him formula to fix his blood sugar, I just about lost my mind. And I knew that this might be a thing, so ahead of time I tried to collect some colostrum, but I think because I was induced early, I think my body just wasn't producing the colostrum yet, so I never was able to collect colostrum ahead of time. If you happen to be able to, or if you're like leaking colostrum, you should totally collect some ahead of time because it will help out with this. But I couldn't. So there we are. They're trying to give him formula. And I was like, no. Let's at least try to see if you can get some colostrum from me. And then the nurses are like, oh, well, you need a lot of colostrum because his numbers are so low. You're not going to have it. And I was like, well, can we at least try? So these nurses showed me how, and like hand expressed colostrum from my breast, and actually they were able to collect enough for him, and it did raise his blood sugar levels. And after that, every single blood sugar that they checked on him was good. So that was the only one that was bad. The other thing that happened to him while he was in the NICU is that he did have a bit of jaundice. I don't think that was a big deal. I think it was actually related to the fact that I have beta thalassemia. But he did have to go on those little light things for a little while, and he had to have a lot of help with the breathing. And it ended up taking 10 days that he was in the NICU before he was able to come home. And I want to do a whole video on that because, wow, the NICU, it was not like I don't think I ever expected it to be that hard. Well, and part of it is because I didn't really expect to have to go to the NICU. The doctor had said we were waiting to 37 weeks, and he had said, 37 weeks is a good time. Their lungs are usually developed by 37 weeks. He thought everything was good. It just wasn't really on my radar that we might end up in the NICU. And if we did, I did read about some people having low blood sugar and they have to go into the NICU for 24 hours to watch their blood sugar and to, fix that. So in my mind, I was thinking, even if we do have an issue because of my diabetes, then it's going to be just a short little stay in the NICU, just overnight, and then we'll get him back and it'll be fine. That's what I had pictured. I had never in a million years thought that my baby was going to be in the NICU for 10 days. So I guess because I wasn't anticipating it, it was quite a shock when it happened, and it was not easy. Because, those first couple of days of postpartum, they're not easy to begin with. Even when you have your baby and your baby's 100% healthy, it's still not easy. But when you have a baby that is, something's wrong with it and it's not with you, but you have to do all this stuff. I had to pump around the clock, and we had to go visit him because I wanted him to know that he wasn't alone and that we loved him. So there was all these extra things that we had to do. Plus I'm trying to recover. So the NICU was 1,000 times harder than I thought, or than I expected things to be. Now, once again, I will say that I do feel, I guess, fortunate that I had the experience of, or no, fortunate is not a good word, but I'm not sure what word to say. But anyways, because of the fact that I had recurrent miscarriages before, I do feel like the NICU wasn't as bad as it could have been. Because I was able to say to myself, well, he's in the NICU and that's really scary, and I'm really scared about his lungs. I don't like this, but he is alive. I was able to give birth to him alive, and we have a chance. He's in the NICU and they are taking care of him. We have the best doctors, we have the best nurses. So that's a whole lot better than what could have been. Maybe something could have happened, and if we hadn't have, if we hadn't have induced, I just feel, what's the right way to say this? I just felt like at least we had a chance for him to survive, since he was able to be in the NICU. No, not able to be in the NICU, but I just feel like even though it sucked with his lungs and him being in the NICU, it was better than an alternative. It was better than having lost him, either through a miscarriage or through stillbirth. And those were things that I was very scared of. Those are the kind of things that I anticipated. I anticipated, oh my God, what if I have a miscarriage very late in the game? What if I have a stillbirth? What if something goes wrong in labor and I have a stillbirth? Those were things that I was very, very scared of. And what ended up happening still was scary, but not as scary as it could have been, because he was alive. And so that was something that I just kept telling myself when I was very stressed about the whole NICU situation. I just kept telling myself, he's alive. He's alive. And that's kind of what I had to hold on to. Yeah, he wasn't with me, but he was alive. And the other thing was being in the NICU, the one that we were in, it was a big room with a whole bunch of beds for all the babies. So you didn't have individual little hospital rooms. So we were able to see all the other babies. And I could see that we were very, very fortunate. The place, the situation that we were in, he was born at 37 weeks. He was 6 pounds, 9 ounces. All he had was, just the lung issue and a little bit of the blood issue. But those were very small issues compared to what a lot of babies in there were dealing with. There were babies that were 2 pounds that were born super early, and babies that were dealing with so many other complications besides just one thing, like the lungs. So it sucked and I didn't like it and it was scary, but we were in a better place than a lot of other people, and we were in a better place than where we could have been. And so I was very aware of that, and I had to keep reminding myself of that every time that I was nervous and upset, and every time that I just wanted to bring my baby home and I was so mad that he was in the NICU. I had to remind myself, well, he is alive and it could be worse. It is, like, he's in a good place. We know that his prognosis is good. Pretty much all babies that are born 37 weeks with these immature lungs, it just takes time. So it's not like we weren't sure, are his lungs going to work or not? We don't know. Is he going to have trouble for the rest of his life? We don't know. No, that wasn't the case. It was just the kind of thing where he just needed more time for his lungs to develop, and then he was going to be fine. So the prognosis for this was like almost 100% of babies eventually are okay. It just takes a little bit of extra time for their lungs to get mature. So after 10 long, grueling, exhausting days, we had a day where we got to go stay in the NICU with him, or like a day and a night where we stayed with him and took care of him while we were in the NICU. And that following morning, we were able to go home. He was exactly 10 days when we went home, and it was great to come home. And the other thing is, it's one of those, like, I guess now I'm like always finding these silver lining kind of things, because the fact that he was in the NICU, that also was kind of cool, because in the end, I think it made him a better baby. Like, it made him really chill and really easygoing. Like, noises don't bother him, because he was in this room with constant beep, 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 beep noises going off nonstop, because they have all these alarms for all the different babies. And there's just tons of people in this giant room. People are talking, stuff's going on. One baby's having trouble and their alarm goes off, then all the people run to it. So he was used to a lot of noise and a lot of commotion, so he could sleep through all of that. He was also used to being pricked. He was used to having IVs shoved in him, and like just being poked and prodded and moved and all kind of stuff done to him that nobody would want done to them. So now he's just kind of real chill, like, oh, okay, you want to change my diaper? Okay, at least it's not an IV that you're putting in me. I'm cool with that. So, again, we are very fortunate that we had our baby, and even though he had a few little issues, he is healthy now. We went to the doctor, went to the pediatrician after like coming back from the NICU. We went to our home pediatrician, and he actually said that looking at him, listening to his chest, looking him over, he would not know that he had been a NICU baby unless we told him. Like, he said his lungs look great. He couldn't even tell that anything was ever wrong with his lungs. So that's amazing. And that was great to hear. So now he is 7 weeks old. He's sleeping right here. I would show him to you if he was awake, but yeah, I don't know. Can you see him? No, I don't think you can. Look, you can kind of see him right there. Anyways, he is 7 weeks today, and he was born 6 pounds, 9 ounces. He is now, let's see, the last time that we went to lactation, he was like 8 pounds and 13 ounces. So he was almost at 9 pounds. So he's doing well. He's growing. His lungs are good. We are very lucky that everything seems good. So I still have some more videos coming your way. And I feel like now I've kind of gotten in the groove of taking care of him, and we kind of have a little bit of a schedule, and I figured out all these like slings and carriers and stuff that help so much. So I have some videos coming up that I definitely want to share with you. I want to do the birth video. I want to talk about the NICU stay, because that was like a huge, that was just earth-changing for us. It was 10 days that felt like a lifetime. So I'll do a video about that. And then also, we've had a pretty interesting / bumpy breastfeeding journey. But like I said, I am stubborn that I want to breastfeed. So we are persevering through it, even though we have had a lot of bumps. But I'm interested to kind of share that with you. And so those are the 3 that are kind of like in the works as of right now that are going to be coming up. But that's all for today. I think he's going to be waking up pretty soon. So Thank you so much for watching, and I wish you hope on your journey wherever it may take you.